Re-Animator, Episode 6, The Plague of the Undead. Opening scene, exterior, downtown Arkham, midnight. A dark, rain-soaked street. A figure stumbles into the glow of a flickering street lamp, a man, pale and shaking, his veins pulsing with sickly green light. His breathing is ragged. A police officer approaches cautiously. "Officer, hey, buddy, you okay?" The man lifts his head. His eyes are wild, his mouth stained with blood. He lunges. The officer barely has time to react before the man tears into his throat. Blood sprays. The officer's dying scream echoes through the city. More figures emerge from the darkness, shambling, twitching, their bodies in various stages of decay. Some howl. Some laugh. Chaos begins. Title sequence rolls. Act 1, a city under siege. News reports flood the airwaves. Violent, cannibalistic attacks across Arkham. Victims found half-eaten. Corpses disappearing from morgues. Witnesses describe unstoppable attackers, impervious to bullets. The police launch an emergency lockdown, but nothing stops the rising plague. At the hospital, West watches the reports with fascination. Dan, however, is horrified. "Dan, this is our fault." West, "Correction, this is progress." Dan grabs him by the collar. "Dan, people are dying, West." West, coldly, "People die every day, Dan. But only I can bring them back." Dan shoves him away, storming out. West watches him go, then turns back to his notes, already formulating a new experiment. Act 2, Lieutenant Chapman enters the case. Enter Lieutenant William Chapman, a grizzled, relentless detective who doesn't believe in the supernatural. He studies crime scenes like a scientist, and he hates loose ends. As bodies pile up, Chapman finds a pattern. Every victim had ties to Miskatonic University. Some were former patients. Some were cadavers at the hospital. "Chapman, this isn't random. Someone's pulling the strings." His investigation leads him to Dan Kane. Chapman watches him from a distance, noting his erratic behavior and late-night hospital visits. Meanwhile, West notices Chapman watching them and begins planning how to deal with the detective permanently. Act 3, Megan's desperate escape. Megan, still held captive in Hill's lab, waits for her moment. Hill's experiments on her father have made him stronger, but unstable. His mind flickers between loyalty and rage. One night, when Hill's attention is elsewhere, Megan whispers to her father. "Megan, Dad, it's me. You have to remember." Her father's expression flickers, a hint of recognition beneath the monstrous haze. Then, Hill enters. "Hill, trying to undo my work, are we?" He injects Dean Halsey with a fresh dose of reagent, reinforcing his control. The Dean's moment of clarity vanishes. He snarls and grabs Megan by the throat. Megan chokes, struggling, but at the last second, the Dean hesitates. His grip loosens. Hill frowns. "Hill, IHMPH. How inconvenient." Megan seizes the moment, grabbing a scalpel from a tray and slashing Hill's severed head. His headless body lunges, but Megan throws a tray of chemicals into its path, sending it crashing into the wall. She runs, breathless, into the city, straight into the chaos of the undead plague. Act 4, a confrontation in the streets. Dan, now convinced that West has gone too far, wanders through the burning city, seeing the horror firsthand. He stumbles upon Megan, barely alive, fleeing through the carnage. "Dan, Megan." She collapses into his arms, sobbing. "Megan, Hill, my father, he made him into. She breaks down, unable to finish. Dan, holding her close, knows what must be done. Meanwhile, West watches from the shadows, unseen. He sees Megan's condition, and instead of empathy, he sees an opportunity. West, to himself a test subject with direct exposure to Hill's alterations, fascinating. Before Dan and Megan can flee, Lieutenant Chapman arrives, gun drawn. "Chapman, Dr. Kane. Drive west. I think it's time you two answered some questions." Final scene and cliffhanger. Before anyone can react, something crashes onto a nearby police car. A grotesquely mutated corpse, one of Hill's latest creations, rises from the wreckage, its body pulsating unnaturally. It turns toward them, snarling. Chapman opens fire, but the bullets do nothing. Dan and Megan run. West? He simply watches, fascinated. Chapman reloads, before realizing West is still standing there. Chapman, are you insane? We need to run. West, smirking *, Lieutenant, if you really want to stop this, I suggest you keep me alive. After all. He steps forward, syringe in hand. I'm the only one who understands what's happening. The mutant corpse charges. Cut to black. End episode 6.